Good morning and welcome to the DAO Weekly Community Press Conference for August the 22nd of 2022. As always, our conference addresses a couple of major issues. The first is gun violence and data around it, among other things, in the last week. And the second is a special topic. And we do indeed have a very special topic today. And a prosecutor who's done a remarkable job with what could have been a difficult case, but due to truly excellent police work and very solid work by our ADA, Tyler Pittenger, we have achieved a serious conviction of a serious offender and a serious sentence that in this instance is entirely appropriate. We will get to that in a minute, but I want to start out by recognizing the people who are here. We have with us today First Assistant DA Carolyn Engel-Tevin. We have First Assistant DA Robert Listenby, ADA Joanne Pescator, who is the supervisor of the DAO's Homicide and Non-Fatal Shooting Unit, which of course is a unit of lawyers primarily, is here. We have Tyler Pittenger, the Assistant District Attorney from our Major Trials Unit, who achieved the conviction that we'll be talking about. Reverend Myra Maxwell is here, the Executive Director of the DAO's Victim Support Services Division. We have Melanie Nelson, who is the Director of the DAO's Crisis Assistance, Response, and Engagement for Survivors Unit, otherwise known as the CARES Unit. ADA Deborah Watson-Stokes is with us. She is a Senior Advisor for Professional Development and Special Projects. Many of those projects are around gun violence. Let me start out by talking about some of the data from the last week. Now, as always, the homicide number is up to prior midnight. Meaning it is up to midnight yesterday, but because of the way we receive the data, other data will be from 8/12 through 8/18 of 22. So as of August the 21st, which is yesterday at 11:59 p.m., Philadelphia has seen 350 homicides year to date. If we look at the same date last year, there were 344 homicides. This is an increase of 6 homicides and a total increase of 2%. Obviously a very troubling and very concerning situation for 100 reasons. The last week from 8/12 to 8/18 showed 6 homicides and 35 non-fatal shootings, which is actually slightly less than what we have seen week by week. On average, we've seen about 10.5 homicides per week. It was not our worst week. No, homicide is okay, but it was not our worst week, I will say that. During the same period, 8/12/22 through 8/18 of 22, there were 152 gun-related incidents. Now, these incidents include both gun possession and various incidents involving guns. It could be a gunpoint robbery, it could be a shooting, it could be something else involving a gun. But of those 152 gun-related incidents, there were 89 arrests made by law enforcement. Those arrests were brought to us for charging. We charged 88. The median bail that was set, and as you all know, we don't set bail, but we make recommendations around bail. The median bail that was set for the illegal possession of guns was $250,000. The median bail that was set for violent offenses with guns was $350,000. There are 3 specific shooting incidents that I'd like to address, give you a little information, possibly an update on these. The first is a non-fatal shooting, which occurred on Saturday, August the 20th at about 9:41 p.m. in the 200 block of Colomb Street, that's C-O-L-L-O-M Street, in the 14th Police District. A 7-year-old black male was shot in the right thigh. He was transported by police to Albert Einstein and placed in stable condition, No arrest has been made by PPD. The investigation remains ongoing. Anyone with information should contact the PPD's Shooting Investigation Group at 215-686-8270. The juvenile victim in this incident was hit by a stray bullet that came through the side of his home and hit him in the thigh. He was playing in his bedroom at the time of the incident. On July 27th, a 7-year-old was shot in this very same neighborhood on the 200 block of Armstrong Street in Germantown, also known as the Brick Town section. Shooting incident number 2 is a double shooting. It is a non-fatal double shooting. On Sunday, August the 21st, at about 12:18 a.m., so just after midnight, in the 5400 block of Walker Street in the 15th Police District, 2 victims were shot. Victim number 1 was a 24-year-old white male who was shot once in the chest and once in the stomach. He was taken to Jefferson Torresdale Hospital by private vehicle, and he was placed in critical condition. Victim number 2, a 24-year-old Hispanic woman, was grazed by a bullet in the chest and nose. She was taken by the same private vehicle as victim number 1 to Jefferson Torresdale, placed in stable condition. In this case, an arrest has been made by PPD. The investigation remains ongoing. Once again, anyone with information should contact PPD's Shooting Investigation Group at 215-686-8270. This is a case in which victim number 1, the male victim's brother, is the defendant in this incident. That defendant is named Eric Kling, K-L-I-N-G. This incident originated from an altercation between the 2 brothers earlier on the 20th. The shooting happens after midnight. The altercation occurred before midnight. Charges were approved by the DAO. The defendant has been arraigned. His bail is set at $1.5 million. Why is that hard? We have been asking for the longest time for bails that were about $1 million or more, sometimes held without bail if it's a homicide, but on a non-fatal shooting, bails that are $1 million or more. Why has it been hard to get a good bail like this, a decent amount of bail for someone who shoots another human being in the chest? The good news is we are seeing some bails that seem to correspond to reality. We have seen a total of $15 million bail for 3 people involved in the quintuple shooting. $3 million times 5, because there were 5 victims. And that is as it should be. When people are shooting other people, conspiring to shoot other people, we need to have good bails because they present a danger to the community. I have to tell you, it is gratifying to see, in this particular case, a bail that is appropriate. Third incident, a shooting incident. This is a double shooting, and it is a homicide. On Sunday, August the 21st, at about 3:47 p.m., in the 1000 block of West Winghawking Street, 2 victims were shot. Victim number 1 is a 25-year-old black female who was shot multiple times in the face. She was taken by a private vehicle to Temple Hospital, where she was pronounced a short time later. Victim number 2, a 40-year-old black male, was shot multiple times throughout the body. He was taken by the same private vehicle as victim 1 to Temple Hospital, and he was placed in stable condition. Victim number 2 in this incident drove himself and victim 1 to the hospital after they were shot. Unfortunately, she did not make it. No arrest has been made by PPD, and this investigation remains ongoing. Anyone with information should contact the homicide unit. That's a different number, at 215-686-3334. As is almost always the case, we have ADA Joanne Pescator with us as the chief of the Homicide Non-Fatal Shooting Unit. She will be available to respond to inquiries regarding the aforementioned shootings and other shooting incidents during the question and answer portion at the end of this conference. You should know she's also on call, so if she goes running out of here, it's just because she's responding to an emergency. That's part of the job, is that you are on call, and sometimes you got to go, and that is the most important thing for her to do with that time if that should happen. Hopefully it will not happen. We would now like to give you a report on services that were provided by the Victim Support Services Division, also to include the CARES Report, Crisis Response Assistance and Engagement Unit for Survivors. It is my pleasure to call forward Melanie Nelson.
Good morning. The CARES unit responded to 6 families, providing them with 18 services. And now time for my We Care moment of the week. Victim advocates, no matter what your title is, please check in on one another. My boss, Myra Maxwell, had a trying weekend in serving victims. I had a trying weekend in serving victims. We pieced together resources to be able to help those in need. But we still stand before you because we care. Self-care is so important. Check in with one another. Give each other air hugs and give each other air kisses. My boss checks in on me weekly and I check in on her because we care. We need each other to stay strong during all of these shootings and during all of these homicides. Please extend your love to any victim services, any victim advocates that you know. We have to stand strong so we can continue to serve all of those in need. We care and we love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. DA's office remains committed to prosecuting VUFA cases, meaning violations of the Uniform Firearms Act, through the DAO's Gun Violence Task Force and our Major Trials Unit, as well as through the Homicide Non-Fatal Shooting Unit. I think it is useful to understand the distinctions between some of the charges that we routinely see in violation of Uniform Firearms Act cases. First of all, Section 6105 is felon in possession of a firearm. Possession of a firearm prohibited. 6106 is firearms that are not to be carried without a license. There is a license to carry that is required for certain types of firearms, most firearms, in the city of Philadelphia and in other counties in Pennsylvania. 6108, carrying firearms on public streets in Philadelphia. 6111 is the illegal sale or transfer of firearms. In other words, straw purchasing, which obviously is a tremendous problem that we have been facing for decades. It is a person who cannot have a firearm because they are disqualified legally, usually because they've been convicted of a felony, using a person who has a clean record to get them a gun. Those are the four main charges that we see. I mention this because in the discussion that ADA Tyler Pittenger is going to provide about the conviction of Kevin Walker, he will be referring to some of these charges, and I think it is good to be clear on that. On these VUFA crimes, the DAO vigorously prosecutes 6105, which is felon in possession, and 6111, which is straw purchase cases. These cases are often handled or supervised by very experienced attorneys to ensure justice is secured on behalf of the Commonwealth. And let me tell you something, a lot of our young attorneys are doing a hell of a job too, and they are getting a lot of justice as well because they are that hardworking and that talented. The case we're going to highlight today is one of many examples of the consequences that await people who choose to illegally carry firearms and sell drugs in the city of Philadelphia. Our office is committed to prevention, to early intervention, to violence interruption. We are committed to second chances for people who are worthy of those second chances. Kevin Walker is not worthy of that. Kevin Walker is the poster guy for somebody who needs to be locked up because he presents an ongoing danger to the community. This is someone who has not only had 9 adult convictions, but he has had 8 revocations of probation and parole because he violated conditions of those probations and parole, sometimes with new arrests. Notably, all of these convictions occurred for activity in the 25th District, on the 1100 block of Rising Sun Avenue, the 3400 block of North Goodman Street, and on Germantown Avenue. As I call ADA Pittenger forward to talk about the prosecution and the successful conviction and sentencing of Kevin Walker, I want to make sure I make clear the role of the Major Trials Unit. This is one of our busiest and most important trial units in the DA's office. It does not handle the same stuff as homicide non-fatals, which of course includes homicides of many types and shootings with injury, but it handles some very, very serious cases, and this is an excellent example of one of those serious cases. These are attorneys working very, very hard for less compensation than they deserve, with bigger caseloads than they should have, and we are grateful for the increasing support that we are receiving in the budget from City Council and from the Mayor. But these guys work incredibly hard, and they do a great job. And let me tell you who else worked incredibly hard on this one. Detective Patrick Gallagher Officers Alston, Keenan, Escamilla, that's Escamilla, and Baker, did a remarkable job in this case. This was a case that, if it had not been handled correctly on the street, would have resulted in a successful motion to suppress. It has become so difficult anymore with recent decisions of the United States Supreme Court and the Pennsylvania courts about search and seizure. It has become so difficult to go after people who have guns that there are situations in which they can actually wave that gun on the street, and there's no basis for police to come up to them and demand to know if they have a permit to carry. I know that sounds insane. It is insane. But that is what we face. And I have to say, Detective Patrick Gallagher, you'll hear the story, but he did a remarkable job. And so did these officers do a remarkable job of conducting themselves in a way that they complied with this difficult law. And when there was a motion to suppress filed by the defense in an effort to sink this case, that motion failed. It failed because of the smart moves, the careful policing that occurred on the street in this particular case, and some great job by this prosecutor. He will be speaking about convictions for possession with the intent to deliver crack, for 6105, possession of a weapon by a felon, 6106, and also conspiracy. I believe we have a PIC charge. I'm sorry. It's also going to be PIC, I believe. The sentence in this case is very considerable. It's a sentence of 9 to 18 years in state custody with additional 2 to 4 year concurrent sentence for a violation of probation. The sentence was given by Judge Covington as the result of this defendant having no choice but to plead guilty to a solid and overwhelming case against him. It is my pleasure to call forward Tyler Pittenger to give you the specifics and tell you the interesting story of this case.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. To just echo the District Attorney's sentiments, I would like to thank and acknowledge Detective Patrick Gallagher of the Northwest Detective Division, as well as 39th District officers in this case, John Alston, Officer Brian Keenan, Officer Escamilla, and Officer Clayton Baker. In this case, they did everything that we asked for in terms of the law and the Fourth Amendment. They did everything by the book. And they were emblematic of all the other officers in Philadelphia, police detectives that serve and protect the citizens of Philadelphia. In this case, going into a couple of noteworthy facts here, Detective Patrick Gallagher was coming back from dropping off evidence at the chemistry unit laboratory when he saw two individuals near Max's Steaks, near the 3600 block of Germantown Avenue. These two individuals, Mr. Walker and another unidentified individual, were passing a firearm back and forth. At the time, Detective Gallagher was by himself, so he went over police radio and had a couple 39th District officers meet with him, and they did a game plan to go up to this 3600 block in marked units and see, Mr. Walker's reaction, since we did not have enough under the current case law to go ahead and do a stop at that point. When they did arrive on the 3600 block in these three marked units, Mr. Walker fled immediately before they even got out of their vehicles, and he was apprehended. And Mr. Walker had a significant amount of crack cocaine. I mean, he had 117 containers. And there is a picture he also had some marijuana as well. And he had United States currency in various denominations, which is why he was charged with possession with intent to deliver. Mr. Walker also had a firearm with him. This firearm was not only, this is a .40 caliber Glock handgun. It was not only loaded with 13 in the magazine, 1 in the chamber, but he also had an extra extended magazine in his pocket as well. This had 19 .40 caliber live rounds in it as well. And as Judge Covington said best at sentencing, Mr. Walker was not new to the game. He was true to the game. He had, for the past 23 years, continuously violated the law. Going back to when he was 14 years old in 1997, he was adjudicated delinquent for possession with intent to deliver. And as a juvenile, he had 2 adjudications of delinquency for possession possessing a firearm as a minor and possessing a firearm with an altered serial number. So even as a juvenile, Mr. Walker was getting in trouble with the law, and this followed him throughout the years. He was convicted twice with possession with intent to deliver narcotics, and he was convicted 4 different times for violating the Uniforms Firearms Act. Because he is a felon, he is not allowed to have a firearm under the law. And notably, these all occurred as Mr. Krasner stated, in a 4 to 5 block radius in the 25th district. Mr. Walker was perpetuating and driving violent crime in Philadelphia, especially in this concentrated area in the 25th district, by selling drugs and carrying firearms. We asked for a high sentence. Judge Covington sentenced Mr. Walker 9 to 18 years, and we believe that was a justified sentence, and are just thankful for the detectives and officers in this case for at least keeping Mr. Walker and people like him off the streets for a significant amount of time. Thank you.
Thank you for that, 88 Tyler Pittenger. All right, as always, we are going to proceed by way of calling on journalists who are in the room and seeing whether they have questions. If there are any outbursts, then we're not going to tolerate that. First, we have John from Action News 6. Do you have anything, sir? No, sir. Okay. Sorry to interrupt your call. Jack from NBC 10. Any questions? No, sir. Okay. Tina from Fox 29. No questions.
I've got questions.
Hold on, sir. Mr. McDonald?
You were speaking earlier about the bail issue.
Yes, sir.
And you were saying that a lot of these people aren't able to get bail at levels that you would like them to have. You seem to contradict yourself sometimes, because you want to end cash bail, but you're applauding cash bail in this case. Can you elaborate?
Sure, I'm happy to. So, I think sometimes, and I say this respectfully, I think sometimes people don't entirely understand what it means to end cash bail. What it means to end cash bail is essentially to operate in a way that is much more like the federal system, that is like the system in the District of Columbia for the last 30 plus years, that is like what is being done in Kentucky, and it's very similar to what has been done in New Jersey, and now I understand will be done in Illinois. And that is you divorce money from the process of figuring out who stays in jail. You have a system of release or held, and the money is not involved. So if we look at Washington, D.C., for example, there's historically about 12% of defendants have been held, and there's no amount of bail that they can pay to get out. It doesn't matter how rich they are. It doesn't matter whether it's Pablo Escobar or it is, I wouldn't want to accuse any of our astronauts of being criminals, but it doesn't matter how much money you got. You're staying, and you're staying regardless of your economic status because you present a danger to the community. The rest of them, that approximately 88%, are released. They may be released with conditions like, you need to report to a place that can provide you with services for addiction. You need to report to a place that can provide you with mental health services. But money is divorced from that. So we don't end up with poor people being stuck in jail for things that people who have employment can pay bail to get out. Does that explain the basic distinction? Okay. So therefore, our position is, because unfortunately Pennsylvania has not gone to this modern system, this successful system, this effective system, our position is to try to simulate that. So what we have done, for example, is for 25 nonviolent misdemeanor offenses, ordinarily we won't ask for any cash bail because we don't want to stick poor people in jail for something dumb, something that's not serious. But on the other hand, we've gone in asking for very high bail for people who shoot people, for people who rape people, for people who do robberies with guns. We've gone in asking for very high bail. Our rate of asking for a bail of basically $1 million or more for situations in which someone is shooting at another person is close to 100%. It's about 99 point some large number 8%. I can only think of one case in over 2 years where we did not seek to have a person held, and that was a special situation involving, I could get into the details, but it was a very special situation where someone who had a permit to carry was in her own home, and she shot someone in the home, and even though we thought that she was culpable, it was more complicated than the shootings we ordinarily see. So that is what we are doing. We're attempting to simulate a no cash bail system. When we have somebody like Walker, or we have people involved in the quintuple shooting, they should be held. I wish we had the ability legally to go and say, just hold them without bail. But we don't have that unless there's a homicide. In that case, that quintuple shooting as of now has not resulted in a death. So that's a case where I'm happy to see that a judge agreed $3 million bail per victim. So $15 million was an appropriate bail. That will hold them. That's more than enough to hold them. So, I hope that explains what we're getting at. The point here is that some people are dangerous. They need to be held. We have always said that. We have also always said that the focus of progressive prosecution is to put more resources and more emphasis on the most serious violent crimes that tear apart society and stop worrying so much about turnstile jumping. Because the fact is the fact. Spending your resources on turnstile jumping means you have fewer resources to spend on solving shootings, and that's where we need to use our resources. Does that answer your question, Mr. McDonald?
If I may follow.
Yes, please.
Later on, you made a quote, there are some people that can be holding a gun up in public and we don't have the right to stop them. Are you saying that you want to see a stop and frisk situation return?
I have always been in favor of legal, I repeat, legal stop and frisk. That has never changed. The U.S. Supreme Court defined that in Terry versus Ohio. We've always supported that. Rudy Giuliani's version, Michael Nutter's version of stop and frisk was illegal. It was illegal. It was harassing conduct directed at massive numbers of people when there was not a reasonable articulable suspicion that crime was afoot. It was taking a whole bunch of teenage young men who were probably black, and they're probably at a bus stop, and it was searching them day after day. We know it was massively ineffective because illegal stop and frisk only resulted in finding any contraband about 1 out of 50 times and finding a gun about 1 out of 250 times. Its other side effect was the massive alienation of young people. This activity happened with some frequency to police officers who were black and were off duty, because that's what was really going on. It was, unfortunately, coming from the top, an effort to behave like an occupying army, and it utterly failed as a law enforcement tactic. The other thing it did is it drove a huge wedge between the community and police and made it very hard for, really hardworking and capable homicide detectives to get witnesses. It made it hard to have people come forward as complainants because of that. So, no, that's not what we are saying at all. When I was speaking about that scenario, there have been 2 or 3 very important cases that have been decided either by the U.S. Supreme Court, which, as you may know, struck down a 110-year-old law that said you needed to have a reason to want to carry a firearm. Well, apparently, New York can't do that anymore because this particular collection of conservative justices think so. And then in Pennsylvania, we had Hicks, which is a case that I think I referenced. This is a remarkable case in which a man at a gas station pulls out a gun. It's visible to police. He shows it to another person in that gas station. That, for the first 30 years of my career, would have been enough to go up and ask him questions, possibly even to arrest him preliminarily, make sure he didn't have a permit to carry. That would have been enough. Well, that has been changed by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and their ruling is that that is not enough. You can be holding a gun at a gas station, outside, on a street. You can show that to other people, and even though there's a very small number of permits to carry compared to the very large number of people who have guns, somehow that's not enough. I totally disagree with the decision, but it is the decision. And what they said in that case is, okay, you can see it, you can't go up to them, you can't do anything about it, but keep looking because maybe they'll do something else. And if they do something else, maybe then you can go arrest them or you can go and you can frisk them. That's what the officers did in this case. In this case, this detective saw someone showing a gun to another person in a car. Obviously, he did not know the records of those people. He did not know it was a felon. If he'd known that was a felon, then they would have had a basis for arrest right there, but he didn't know that. So they wisely gathered together these officers. He went over radio, gathered these officers together, and they all came up with a strategy where they would essentially surround the area and see what this individual would do. Well, he had such a long record. He was coming out of a store with a gun on him. There were drugs, that when he came out, he started to do all kinds of suspicious stuff, including running. They now had enough. But that's some pretty good fishing. That's knowing how to let that cork bob a little bit before you pull it in. That was some pretty good fishing.
So to bring this full circle.
Yes, sir.
Would you like to see a version of stop and frisk in Philadelphia?
There is a version of stop and frisk. There always has been. It is the version that was allowed under the United States Supreme Court decision Terry versus Ohio, which is probably about 50 years old. The part Rudy Giuliani left out before he got his law license taken away for being part of an insurrection was that he was calling for illegal stop and frisk. He wasn't calling for legal stop and frisk. He was calling for illegal stop and frisk. And I am utterly opposed, as any law enforcement leader, any elected official should be. I am utterly opposed to telling the police to do things that are illegal. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Do you have any other questions?
I've got a question.
All right. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to see you, and we will see you again.
You need to